Good evening. I always do my lesson in the evening. This is the lesson for June 14th. I hope everybody's well. And I know Fred was feeling a little bad. He texted me that things are going better for him. And so I'm very appreciative to the Lord for that. My wife's been cleared for some medication that hopefully will help her in her condition. And the world's still here. It's kind of a scary place. We don't know what's really going to happen. But you have to always keep in mind that our Father in heaven has got things under control, even though it looks very bad. One thing we can say is we live in interesting times. And that actually, I believe, originated in China, and it was more of a, basically a teasing curse. May you live in interesting times meant get ready for some crap. I know the Dalai Lama said when Mao Zedong was chasing him, we sure do live in interesting times. Some of the current event, I guess the biggest one is this concept of defending or defunding the police. And it's actually kind of getting some traction. I have my doubts that it would happen, but maybe some good would come out of it. And I know that I get myself in more trouble, even with some of the members in our church when I make these controversial points. But, in my opinion, everything needs to be checked once in a while. Need to be put in check. I mean, the funding for law enforcement has skyrocketed. We've got buildings in Utah that basically listen and record every movement, every word, everything we say. We've got police forces with military weapons. And there's a lot of things that I don't really believe are being handled right. If you want to arrest someone, you knock on the door. And you say, well, that's kind of dangerous. Yeah, if you take a job or you go into the service, many jobs have inherent dangers, so get used to it. But to break down doors at 4:30 in the morning, terrorize a whole family with a crew that has assault rifles and tanks and everything else, is just overdone. Everything's overdone. We're in this jam because something was overdone. Putting your knee on someone's head for 10 minutes is overdone. So maybe some good will come out of it. I know, when you think about, law enforcement has, especially in TV, had a good reputation. You had Matt Dillon from the Gunsmoke series, right? And he would sit on his in the marshal's office, or go out and catch some bad guy. But I never saw an episode where he would sit on his horse and get kind of backed in between a couple of buildings and wait for a wagon or another horse to ride down Main Street, and then chase after them and check their stirrups and whether their saddle blanket was straight and their riding gear was correct. And I mean, we have law enforcement, when there are emergencies that are usually out revenuing on trying to find problems with vehicles, and when you call them out, if you've had a break-in and you would like the criminal caught, you've lost several $1,000s worth of stuff, and you ask them to take fingerprints and see if maybe they can match something to someone that might have done this. They say, we don't do that. So maybe there will be a little change. So that might be one good thing. If they're put in a little bit of a check and they have to rethink about their priorities and how they're going to handle law enforcement. You say, Ed, that's a one-sided thing. Well, I can assure you, these rioters and the ones that have started some little nation in Washington, I believe it's Seattle. Isn't it Seattle, Renee? Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're going to be put in check too. Everything winds up getting put in check. It's part of life. And I know God's in control of things, so please don't feel like I'm one-sided on who's the hero and who's the villain. I know, sis, there's as many heroes that work at McDonald's as work in law enforcement. I'm not going to be a idolater and worship uniforms. There's people that clean bathrooms and hallways and mop the floors in the rooms of hospital patients that are taking as big a chance as the doctors and nurses. Hauling out the garbage, the tissue that was sneezed into and things like that, and trying not to catch this bug or any other bug. So heroes are few, but they're in all fields. And that's my current event. Little speech there. And hate me if you want to, that's just my theory. What I wanted to do, and there's no way I'm going to be able to do this in one lesson, is I wanted to work on a topic about marriage and divorce, which has created some controversy even among our membership. And I can clarify my position and hope I back it up scripturally and doctrinally. And then if I'm wrong, please feel free to, show me some scriptures that would indicate that I have not interpreted this correctly. One of the main questions about marriage is what constitutes marriage. And there are people that are of the opinion that the ceremony constitutes the marriage. And I have no problem with the ceremony. If you got some friends that want to come to your marriage, that'd be great. And some people believe it's when the paperwork is turned into the state. That's when it's an actual marriage. Until then, it's not a marriage yet. And then there's myself. Maybe I'm alone on this, but I believe that what actually constitutes and the marriage is when you have sex with your husband or wife, and am I saying that that's all that a marriage should be? A simple sex act? No. But once you've had sex with someone, you are married in God's eyes, and you will be held responsible for that person until death, which gets me in a lot of trouble. I've taught on this subject before, but I haven't had anybody convince me that I'm wrong on this. The first marriage that took place was in Genesis chapter 2. And when God took that rib out of Adam, which was a type of Christ, the wound in the side, basically giving birth, is the only time a man's actually given birth, because the term woman basically means from the womb of man, and a man's womb, in the case of Adam, was on his side, and as Christ gave birth to the world with the piercing of his side. So you'll notice that right from the beginning of the Bible, in the book of Genesis, everything winds up being a picture or a type of Christ over and over and over again. From the beginning of the Old Testament to Revelations, it's one picture after another of Christ. And people, I could argue at that point, well, where was the wedding reception, and where was the documents to turn over to the state? There was none. But if you look in Matthew chapter 19, the Pharisees, in verse 3, it says, also came unto Christ, testing him, and saying unto him, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? And he answered and said unto them, have ye not read that he which made them at the beginning made them, use my cursor here, made them at the beginning, made them male and female, and said, for this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. Wherefore they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder. So the scribes and Pharisees came back with this. They say unto him, why did Moses, who wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch, why did Moses then command to give a writing of divorcement and to put her away? Why did Moses allow this document so that you could divorce your wife? And he saith unto them, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, suffered you, or put up with this concept, suffered you to put away your wives. But from the beginning it was not so. And I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and we'll talk about this, and shall marry another, is committing adultery. And whosoever marrieth her which is put away doth commit adultery. So Moses allowed this putting away because of our hard hearts. But from the beginning and from God's plans, it was never to be this way. And even if you legally divorce this woman, Christ is saying, and she goes out and marries someone else, she's turning that person into an adulterer because she's now an adulteress with him. And when they come together to consummate the marriage, she is making them one, and now he becomes an adulterer. This scared his disciples. So his disciples said unto him, if this be the case of the man, his disciples said unto him, if the case of the man be so with his wife, it is good not to marry. These are pretty strict rules that Christ just laid out. Maybe it's better just to stay alone. But he said unto them, all men cannot receive this. They can't receive this saying except a few to whom it is given. For there are some eunuchs, and the term eunuchs means someone who is non-sexual. He's been castrated or born without testicles, or has decided to live a life without ever getting married or having any romantic affiliations. Because remember, the way I'm going to teach this, if you have sex with someone, you're no longer two, you're one in God's eyes. You are married. You say, but I'm never going to see her again. It was just a casual fling or whatever. No, you're going to be held accountable as though you didn't perform for an entire lifetime because it was just a little fling to you. You didn't perform the duties of what you should do for your spouse and protect, provide, till death do you part. But he says, for there are some eunuchs which are so born from their mother's womb, and there are some eunuchs which are made eunuchs of men. Made them, I guess, more cooperative and less chancy with their wives. And there be eunuchs which have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. He that is able to receive it, let him receive it. And this is one of the things that Paul decided to do. He wanted to devote himself to the work of his faith and decided not to have a wife. And he just carried out. And so he was made himself a eunuch. He didn't disfigure himself. He made himself with the heart of a eunuch. or non-sexual person to carry out the Lord's work. Now, it said that Moses suffered you, but from the beginning it was never to be, no writing of divorce. And if you can figure out a way to get your paperwork on that divorce, legal and binding divorce, up to heaven, and use that as some kind of an excuse for putting away your wife, or her putting you away, and she brings the paperwork, I can assure you that God's not interested in your paperwork. But if you go back where Christ is talking about Moses suffering this out of the hardness of your heart, go back to Deuteronomy chapter 22 and look in verse 13. And these are the laws put down by Moses. He says, if a man take a wife and go in unto her and hate her, and give occasion of speech against her, and bring up an evil name upon her, and say, I took this woman, and when I came to her, I found her not a maid. So at the consummation of the marriage, after the feasts and the celebrations and whatnot, when everybody waited for him to go in and consummate the marriage, they took vows. Now go in and sign the vows, the consummation. The vows that you take are like the writing of a contract. The signing of the contract is the actual sexual act. And so this guy went in, according to him, and found her not to be a virgin. It's interesting that he would have that kind of experience and expertise making love to her for the first time and deciding, wait a minute, you're not a virgin. I've been around for a while and you're not fooling me. Well, how would he know unless he was not a virgin either? There was no hymen, maybe she didn't bleed or whatever. There are women that don't bleed. How do you know she wasn't a virgin? I could just tell. I've been around. Yeah, because you weren't a virgin either. I found her not to be a virgin. Then shall the father of the damsel and her mother take and bring forth the tokens of the damsel's virginity unto the elders of the city in the gate. And the damsel's father shall say unto the elders, I gave my daughter unto this man to wife, and he hateth her. And lo, he hath given occasion of speech against her, saying, I found not thy daughter a maid, and yet these are the tokens of my daughter's virginity. So the father's bringing out the proof of his daughter's virginity, and they shall spread the cloth before the elders of the city. And the father's supposed to bring the sheet out that they made love on and show that there is some bleeding and that she was a virgin. And let me tell you something. What father wouldn't make sure that there was some blood on that sheet? And what husband is so cold-blooded that he wouldn't have cut himself and made sure that there was blood on that sheet? Just like Christ allowed himself to be cut to save us. This hard-hearted man wasn't willing to bleed for his wife. Out of the hardness of your hearts, that hard-hearted man wanted to get a divorce, right? Now it says, and the elders of that city shall take that man and chastise him, and they shall immerse him in 100 shekels of silver. It's not a bad punishment for lying. And give them unto the father of the damsel, because he hath brought up an evil name upon a virgin of Israel. And she shall be his wife, and he may not put her away all his days. No more tries to get rid of your wife. You'll never be allowed to divorce her. But if this thing be true, and the tokens of virginity be not found for the damsel, then they shall bring out that damsel to the door of her father's house, and the men of the city shall stone her with stones that she die, because she hath wrought folly in Israel to play the whore in her father's house. So shalt thou put evil away from among you. So you can see it would take a pretty hard-hearted man to do that to a woman. Now, I know you say, well, this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Who's going to get married and find that their wife wasn't a virgin? Or what wife is going to get married and find that her husband wasn't a virgin? I think all of us were virgins when we got married. I don't think so. But I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to achieve that status. And I think you'll find most people aren't. Now, I don't want to go any farther, so we're going to stop here and we'll work some more on what consummates a marriage and more on the divorce thing. So, Father and God, thank you for our church. Thank you for loving us. Forgive us where we fail you, Lord. And help me figure out what words I should say that edify you and our church, Lord. For it's in Christ's name I pray, amen.